When I was a little boy, there were two things I wanted the most in life. One was to know that God existed, and the other was to have a wife. By the age of 12, I started to pray for both earnestly. Today's testimony is not about how I came to know God existed, but how God gave me my wife. If you wish to know God, click on the linked videos at the end of this video. So, when I was 10, I had two very close friends, Matt and Adrian. One time, me and Adrian randomly decided to buy a coconut from the grocery store, but we couldn't open it. We tried smashing it on the cement doorstep to his house. I don't remember the details, but eventually we must have got a hammer or something. One day, when I was 39 years old, Matt told me Adrian had recently moved close by to me. I hadn't seen him in many years. I tried calling and texting Adrian, but he never replied back. I gave up. Finally, after a few months had passed, I had a dream about him and decided that morning to try texting him again. He got back to me, and we got back in touch and hung out about 2 or 3 times before the following events happened. A very long story short, one day, at 39 years old, I'd been listening to sermons about wives, and I got wife fever again. I prayed all my life for a wife, sometimes every day, probably every day for years. And there was only a very short period of my time when I didn't pray for a wife, a little bit in my 30s. And but at this time in my life, I got wife fever again. I wanted to have a wife. And when I was younger, I prayed all the time for a wife. I didn't want to reach 40 years old and still be unmarried if it was in God's will that I have a wife. So the last few years up to that point, I'd been listening to sermons online, and at the time, I was doing everything online. My main activity was talking to people on Twitch, because up until recently, I didn't really have anyone in person to hang out with, at that time. So in order to hang out with people on Twitch, I would make an account on Discord. My username was The Guest, because at first I would just make temporary guest accounts so I could join in watching a movie with a Twitch community or that sort of thing. But this time I made an official account and called myself The Guest. One pastor I watched online said we should find a church in person and online was no substitute. Because that pastor was Baptist, I thought I should find the closest Baptist church to where I live, because that's my best bet in finding a church that has sound doctrine. And I also thought that my wife could be waiting for me there, since I'd been praying for a wife again. But I had waited so long that I doubted it. Nonetheless, I looked up the nearest Baptist church to me and found it, read its website, and found out its doctrine was sound. But every Sunday, I'd just decide to stay at home, though I kept thinking one of these Sundays I should go to that church. When I used to go to church in person regularly, I was a part of the worship team for a while, the singers, and was naturally attracted to the young women who sang, too. I had been listening to sermons about ask and receive, or reading about it in the scriptures, the faith passages. And I really wanted that to happen to me, because I was tired of waiting. I believed that God could do that, just like Jesus said, "And all things whatsoever ye shall ask in prayer, believing, ye shall receive." That he could make a miracle happen for me. And if it was in his will, and I asked in faith. It was my custom to pray in the morning, and lately, in the mornings, I'd been praying for a wife, and for all the things I wanted in a wife. And my prayers had gotten more and more specific, and I'd gone so long in my life without ever getting a wife that I felt like if God didn't do everything for me, it would be impossible for me to get a wife. And so I prayed for these things. Most important of all, I prayed that she must be someone who truly believes in Jesus, that she would come to me, that she would pick me up because I was so shy, that God would make it impossible for me to screw it up, even if I sinned, that I would get her no matter what. God, make it impossible for us not to get married, that he would make it faster than I could imagine, because I had waited so long that I knew it would cause me suffering to be with someone and wait too long for marriage. I wanted to do it right and wait until marriage before we did anything. I prayed that God would make it impossible for us to separate, that she'd be just as affectionate as me, because I'm very affectionate and even clingy, and I would need to be with someone who was the same, that we would be best friends, that she would be someone who would accept me exactly as I was, even where I was in my life, with no job, living with my mom, graciously sharing her own car with me. I even prayed for things that I considered optional, that she would be young enough to make up for my lack of years of love, but old enough for us being together not to be a taboo. But it was okay with me if she was older. I prayed many things, and I don't remember all of them, but I do remember I even told God that I was attracted to Southeast Asians, but that it didn't matter if she was one or not. I just thought, if I'm going to pray for everything, I may as well throw that in there. So one day, I decided to step out in faith. I said to God, I'm going to this restaurant alone, and I want to meet my wife there. Now, I had been to this restaurant many times before. I especially liked their coconut milkshake. I get to the restaurant, and the restaurant is full. It's packed. I think I did look around, see if there was anyone who might fit someone who could be my wife, a girl sitting by herself or something like that, or I don't know. But, I don't think I did. And so I'm sitting there, and a waiter comes up to me and asks me if I want, tea or anything to drink first, kind of thing. And I can't remember exactly what I said, but I think I ordered the coconut milkshake right then and there. I asked oh, I want a coconut milkshake or whatever. But whatever, I think that is exactly what I said. But whatever I said, that waiter never came back. And I kept waiting and waiting and waiting. And that waiter was supposed to be my waiter. But sitting across from me was one of the waitresses, and she was about to, or she either was about to or was having her lunch. But she saw me waiting there, so she got up and she took my order instead. And this waitress, she'd served me many times before. I even remember one time I went in just for a coconut milkshake, and they were all out. She said that they didn't have any, and she recommended, she said, well, we do have the strawberry milkshake. And I said, nah, I'm sorry, but I really just like the coconut or whatever. I felt bad because I don't normally walk into a restaurant and then walk away without ordering something or whatever, made me feel guilty. But anyway, so when she took my order, she handed me the little order pad and then went away. And on the order pad, I drew a version of the order pad with a little hand on it and my order. So I had my actual order on the order pad, and then I drew a tiny little picture of the order pad with my hand and partial bits of the order on that drawing, right? Just for fun while I waited to pass the time. And once in a very blue moon, I will do a little doodle on an order pad or something like that. Very rarely, but sometimes I'll do it. And usually when the waiter or waitress or whoever would see it, or if it's on a napkin or whatever, if somebody saw it, they would say something like, oh, because people like drawings and stuff like that. This waitress came back. She took the order pad from me. She said nothing. Right? I'm like, oh, well, whatever. And then she sat across from me and ate her lunch. And by the end, the restaurant was empty except for us. So I go to pay, and as I go to pay, then she says something. She says she wants my website, right? I said, I don't have one. And she's like, really? Or whatever, I said, yeah. So I go to pay, I pay, right? I'd been going to this restaurant for years, and I always gave a tip, except the last month or two. Up to that point, I'd been trying to save money, so I stopped tipping them. But on this day, I decided to start again, so I gave a tip. So I drive home, and then I start to wonder, was that my chance? She fit some of the things I prayed for. She was younger, but still a mature woman. She was Southeast Asian, and she came to me instead of the waiter who was supposed to wait on me. And she even, in a way, picked me up by presumptuously asking me for my website just because I doodled a simple little drawing on the order pad. I thought maybe I was supposed to have the courage to say, well, I don't have a website, but you can have my number or my email, just to share drawings or whatever. Honestly, I thought if God answered the prayer, it would have been a customer. I never suspected it would be a member of the staff, let alone someone who I'd had as a waitress many times before. I also thought someone as beautiful as her at her age was likely already taken or married. When I got home, because of my thoughts in the car, I felt sad. Like if that was my chance, I didn't have the courage to even say, well, I don't have a website, but here's my number or my email. I prayed then that if she was the one God chose, I'd see her later that day. But I knew I was too much of a coward to make it happen. To drive back to the restaurant and be like, you know what? Even though I don't have a website, but I looked up the restaurant number and I thought to myself, maybe I can call the restaurant and be like, I was your customer. I was just there and you asked for my website. But I was too much of a coward to even do that. But then I reminded God that, if she was the one, I reminded him that part of my prayer was that he would make it impossible for us not to get together. And then I did what I always do after I go out to eat. I checked my bank account online so I could update how much money I had left to spend for the rest of the month. And then I saw it. This was literally moments, like one moment after I reminded God that I wanted him to make it impossible and that I prayed I'd see her again later today. My bill from the restaurant was $253.23. I had to go back. I went back and the main waiter, the one who was supposed to serve me, was figuring out how I should get my refund, whether by cash or to try the debit and see if it would work or etc. She was sitting on the side and she said to me, I was praying that you would come back. I looked at her and said, I prayed too, but I didn't tell her what I prayed for was a wife. When she said she prayed, I wondered. Another thing I prayed for in a wife was that she would also truly believe in Jesus. But I still didn't know who she was praying to when she said that, or whether or not she believed in Jesus. At some point in all of this, I told them how much I loved their coconut milkshake. Just something to say to fill the time. The waitress told me she came from a village that was famous for their coconuts. That was the thing that grew in her specific village. I remembered Adrian and told her the story about the time we both bought a coconut together. But in all this time, I still didn't have the courage to say, hey, you wanted my website earlier. I don't have one, but here's my number or my email. Anyway, then she went away to do waitress things, and I couldn't see her anymore. So I thought, opportunity lost. Because again, I had no courage. So here I was getting my refund back. I had another opportunity. God even made it so that I had to drive back because of the mistake on my bill. And there she was, and I could have talked to her and said, oh, by the way, you asked for my website earlier, let's exchange numbers or something. And I still didn't have the courage to say that to her. So I felt sad. Now she was gone. She was out of sight somewhere in the back, probably doing waitress things. I don't know where. I couldn't see her. And the main waiter was dealing with my refund. And at this point, the main waiter, he'd figured out that it would be best if I were refunded by cash, and he was giving me back my money in cash. Then right near the end, the waitress suddenly came back out of the blue and said, I really want to follow you on Instagram. Now at this point, she knew I didn't have an art website, so why would I have one for Instagram? Remember, the only thing she knew about me was that I could draw a medium grade doodle. I found out later that she didn't even remember having me as a customer before, even though I knew she'd been my waitress a few times. Then after, when I told her about the time I went in just for a coconut milkshake and there wasn't any left, she did remember that because that was her. I wasn't even sure if that was her. I had to ask her if she remembered that happening, and she did. But anyway, after she asked to follow me on Instagram, I said, I don't have an Instagram. But then finally this time I added, but do you have Discord? And she said yes. But for real, she didn't. She didn't even know what it was. I didn't know my Discord tag off by heart, so we exchanged phone numbers, and I got my refund back from the waiter. Then I left. When I got home, two things happened. I texted the waitress my Discord name and tag, which, if you remember, the name part was the guest. So I texted her something like, here is my Discord. It will be easy to remember because I was the guest at your restaurant and you were my waitress. Now that I think about it, I should have took a picture of that text, but I always delete my history. She probably still has it though. Okay, it turns out she does. And that my memory was perfect. I don't want to dox myself, but I say, my name, and then I say, here's my Discord, the guest, and then hashtag the number. And then I say, it will be easy to remember, comma, because I was the guest at your restaurant, exclamation mark. So there you go. Here, let me see if I can cover enough of this up that you can see that I'm telling you. Wait. I can probably just okay, hand, finger. Oh, come on. It's highlighting it. This is annoying. Okay. Close enough. I'm sure you believe me. But anyway, so the second thing that happened was I heard a voice in my mind tell me to write down everything that had happened. What I prayed before going to the restaurant, what happened at the restaurant, etc. So while waiting for her to get off work, to see if she would text me back. That's what I did. I wrote it all down, then I waited. At 10:30 p.m., I got a text, which is also here. And we added each other on Discord. I don't need to read them. Okay. To see if she would text me back. Yeah. And we added each other on Discord. When I looked on the side, I saw that her Discord account was brand new. She just made it. It came into my mind. The first two things I should ask her were, "Are you Christian?" And then if she answered yes, I would ask, "Are you married?" But instead, I wrote, "So today was interesting, right? Are you an artist?" To which she replied, "Yes, definitely. I didn't expect that I was brave enough to ask for your contact. I do love art. I really enjoy art, but I don't draw well. But I am a hairstyling student, so I love creativity." Then I wrote, "You said you prayed when you messed up the bill. Do you believe in Jesus?" And she answered, "Yes, I am a Christian. And you?" And I felt like I had to take a step in faith. The reason I had to write down what had happened that day, so I wrote back, "Then I think you should read my journal today." And I sent her what I just wrote while waiting. My prayer and everything that happened. I waited anxiously. Finally, after reading it, she wrote back, "I am literally in tears right now. I've been crying since the moment I started reading your journal at the very beginning. Am I dreaming? God not just answered your prayer, he answered mine too." She also wrote, "I've been waiting for this moment for life. I have been praying since I was a teenager for my husband also. You know what? The moment I saw you, I think that you're special. I really wanted to talk to you, but I was really, really shy. The moment when you paid and left, I was really sad and thought I should have asked for your contact. And when I realized I made mistake," yeah, I'm including even the spelling mistakes in this, the grammar mistakes, "even though I was sure that I do check before pressing the number, I'm sure that God does his miracle. And when I heard that you gonna come back, I pray to God, God, if he is the one, please give me courage to ask for his contact. And after you left, when I was cleaning the restaurant, I prayed again, God, if he is not the one, please don't let me continue to like him. But if he is the one, please give me signs. And here you are, sharing your journal. I know God is answering my prayers. For years and years, I was all alone by myself. When all my friends have boyfriends, husbands, I am still single and waiting for God. Sometimes I feel really... maybe I shouldn't read this part for her. But long story short, she was praying the same thing. And at the end, she said, I know God knows and God cares and loves me so much, and my life will be his testimony. So we talked all night until around 4 a.m. I found out she went to the church where I'd been thinking of going every week, but didn't. And not only that, she was on the worship team, which means she was one of the singers. Out of all the singers at that church, she was the only one who was eligible for me to marry. Being the only girl who was single and not married there, I would have recognized her from the restaurant and spoke to her, or if I didn't recognize her right away, I would have spoke to her likely just because she was on the worship team and found out she worked there and then recognized her. So my wife was waiting for me there at that church, and in the one spot where I'd be most likely to notice her. But what's more is that that church was dying. There were so few people in the congregation that she was the only eligible person in the entire church for me to marry. But I didn't realize that at the time, only later. What's more than that, this church, which was the closest Baptist church to my house, was not the closest Baptist church to her house at all. In fact, there was one within walking distance right across the street from her. Across the street from her house, there's a short little street that literally leads to a Baptist church. On Google Maps, you can see her house from the church. It's less than a 3-minute walk. Less than a 3-minute walk. But despite that, she was going to the Baptist church closest to my house, which is many, 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 many more kilometers away. I'm in a different town even. The only church, and it was the only church that I'd been considering going to, and that I thought maybe my wife would be waiting for me there. I can't remember her side of the events exactly, like why or how she ended up going to that church regularly, but I know she was invited there. And of course, the real reason was because God arranged it. I later found out also that she was the only Christian believer at her work, I believe. And she was the only person working that restaurant who was single and female and etc. In other words, the only person there eligible for me to marry. The other girl was already had a fiance. The other girl who would be like around my age, and then the manager or whatever, obviously not married and much older, and then the other waiters were male, and all that stuff. So. But yeah, I thought if God answered my prayer, though, I was thinking it would be a customer. I never really thought it'd be one of the waitresses, let alone a waitress that I'd been served by many times before. I thought someone as beautiful as her at her age would already, be married. I also told her right away my situation, that I lived with my mom and all of that. And just like I prayed for, she accepted me right away. Exactly as I was, and even agreed we would marry each other in that very first conversation, because she had been praying for the same thing and because of the miracle that had just happened to us. Anyway, the next few weeks, miracles happened pretty much every day. I haven't even told you all the things that added up or that we noticed and were shown by God, and I'm just too lazy to do it. And I pray for God's forgiveness, and we have records of all of it. The Discord chat that probably has our phone, she probably has our phone conversations, which I know she does because I just got them from her. But when I was like writing this to remember everything to say, that's what I wrote down, that she probably had the phone conversations, but now I know that, yeah, she does. The journal I was told to write down, I have that too. I have the receipt. So here's a picture of the actual receipt. I redacted anything that would be like, personal, right? You can clearly see $253.23. So there was the receipt with the miracle mistake on it that caused me to have to drive back to the restaurant, that I discovered just when I reminded God that I asked he would make it impossible for us not to get together if she were the one, and prayed I'd get to see her later if she were, but didn't think that was likely since I wasn't going anywhere and I had no reason to, and I didn't have the courage to go back just to say, hey, you know how you wanted my website? Well, here's my number. And she fit everything I prayed for, even right down to being Southeast Asian, which was not something I really cared about. I just threw it in there as an optional, if you wanted to answer this part, I don't care either way, but I'm attracted to this kind of thing, to God. Anyway, because we're both Christians, we agreed we would do it right and not do anything before marriage. You know what I mean. She was afraid even to hold hands at first. And I was afraid at first that she wasn't affectionate. Because remember, I prayed for someone who was just as clingy and affectionate as me. But I took it on faith, since God answered everything else I asked for, that she would be. And I did find out later that she was. She didn't even kiss my lips until the day we were married. And even at the marriage ceremony, she froze up and I kissed her lips for the first time but she didn't even kiss me back until later after the ceremony. She just stood there stiffly. At one point, we agreed, because it was a miracle from God, and we were both older, and it was part of my prayer, we would marry quickly. There was no reason to suffer by waiting. So we called the marriage lady and got an appointment, and there were only about 3 days available because we were approaching the holidays. But for various reasons, we settled on one date in particular as the safest bet for everyone to be able to make it, because we needed at least 2 witnesses to get legally married. And because of the holidays, we couldn't hire staff to fill that legal requirement. After the date was set, my miracle fiance said something like, "Wow, it really is hard waiting. It's a lot of temptation," right? Because we both waited for a long time. We're both adults, you know? And when I heard her use the word temptation, it came into my mind, wait a second. How long will we have been together from the day the miracle happened that put us together until the day we're getting married? And we did the math, and it would be exactly 40 days. 40 days of temptation, like Jesus in the wilderness. God threw that bonus sign in for us, among others. Finally, we got a last minute date. The marriage lady snuck us in after the office was closed as the last appointment for her before she went on holidays, I believe. And we had to enter the building from the back door because the front was locked and all that stuff. You know, they were closing for the holiday. And my prayer for a fast marriage was answered. We were married on December the 22nd. The only friend of mine who attended my wedding was Adrian, who I'd recently got back in touch with, and who, I told her about the coconut story that happened with me and him. I didn't even remember or bother to look up half the things that God did for us that were miraculous, perfect timings, and things that needed to be in place at exactly the right time, things we did that neither of us would ever normally do, or et cetera, et cetera. She also prayed for specific things that she wanted in a future husband before she met me. And one of them was that her husband would be exactly 172 centimeters, which I thought was weird. Also, where I live, men are much taller than me on average. It's normal in my culture when speaking about height or weight to use feet, inches, and pounds. But because I'm Canadian, the government does use centimeters and stuff. So I had my height in centimeters written down on my driver's license, even though in like everyday speech, we don't, at least I don't use we don't use centimeters and stuff like that. But our doctors do, and our government does, like where I live. And everywhere in Canada, the government and the doctors do, because they have to. But like colloquially, like culturally, locally, if you're talking about your weight or something, you talk in pounds, like Americans. Or if you talk about height, you typically would say like I'm 5'7" or whatever. Although nowadays it is a bit more common that people will say they're centimeters. I don't understand the centimeters, but anyway, so I pulled out my driver's license where it was written exactly 172 centimeters, and I showed it to her. And I know that sometimes it's written as 173 for me. But this time I think I had to take my shoes off or something when I got my picture taken for my license renewal, something like that. I'm not sure, but for whatever reason, it was 172 on the license. And I guess that's what I am, like without my shoes on. Anyway, she has a whole side of the testimony that I couldn't even begin to remember. There was also this weird thing about sevens. There was a lot of miracles, including the number 7 in her testimony. Some of them were my parking spot in my apartment building was number 7. Her family calls her 7. That's her name. with her family. Even though she's not the seventh born, there's something about her culture where they count their children differently. So she's considered the seventh. So they call her seven. And there were a few more number seven miracles too. There's also a miraculous coincidence involving her real first name too. But this is our testimony in short. Anyway, all that to say, if you don't believe in Jesus, do it now. Click the links at the end of the video and call upon the name of the Lord to be saved. Don't wait. The number one thing that will improve your relationships is God. And no relationship truly works without him. And if you are a Christian and you're in a relationship, quit fornicating. Get married. And if you're not fornicating, that's great. But don't wait too long, because the longer you wait, the more tempting it will be. You don't wait to make best friends with someone, and it doesn't take forever to get to know a friend. Staying friends is a choice to always be kind, to stay together, to make up when you fight, to forgive, to love. Marriage is no different. You know if you get along as best friends pretty much right away, just like a best friend, and you choose to stay together or not. You don't have to wait forever to get married, just like you don't have to wait forever to decide if someone is your best friend or not. There is literally no reason to wait forever and commit fornication or test out if you're compatible. Our culture has taught us many lies. You don't have to wait a year to know if someone is good to marry. In the same way, you don't have to wait a year to know if someone is your best friend. So better to marry young while you have the energy to raise kids, and so that you get to enjoy the romantic aspect of life during your best years for it, and for as long as you can. Also, there's no such thing as being ready to get married or have children. Culture has lied to you and told you that your life has to be perfect before you do any of these things. So people nowadays wait and wait and wait and live in fornication, having sex and living together before getting married as though they were married. It's one thing to be wise and to choose wisely, but at some point, you have to put your faith in God and just go for it. Get married. Then after that, if you want, again, it's okay to be wise, but don't wait forever. At some point, you have to put your faith in God and just go for it and ask God for a child. Getting married after only 40 days sounds pretty fast, right? But have you ever dated someone for 40 whole days and never even once kissed them right on the lips? Let alone did other stuff? Doesn't sound so fast now, does it? Society tells you getting married quickly is bad, but having sex and all that quickly is fine. But what sense is that? Isn't it better to have that commitment, that promise, that you'll stay together and that you mean it before you do stuff that could lead to getting pregnant? You know what's even more important than having money if you get pregnant? Being a husband and wife who are committed to stay together, who have chosen to stay together, no matter what, and mean it. The baby food is free for a while. God set all that up for you. You don't pay for their college the second they come out of the womb. A baby costs a bit of money, but it's not like you need a fortune right away. And you don't even know if college will matter in their future. You don't know the future. You don't even know if both of you can have a baby when you start trying, or when it is you'll get one, if you can. The number one thing for your marriage to work is that you both believe in Jesus and put God as the head of your relationship, first and foremost. And in my opinion, the second most important thing is that when you mess up, you are quick to humble yourself and apologize, and that you are both equally quick to forgive. And that you say these things to each other as early as possible, that you'll put God first, and that you will forgive each other when things go wrong, because we're all human and imperfect. Also, let me get something off my chest. I know I look younger than my age, but the amount of people who try to discourage you from getting married is sickening. People telling you, there's a honeymoon phase, but after a year of being together, you'll feel different about each other. Don't rush, and blah, blah, blah. First of all, having to wait until you are 39 years old is not rushing. None of these people have waited anywhere near as long as I have. And anyone who has never said those things to me. Instead, they said things like, "When is the date?" Because they fully understood. Also, at 39 years old, there is no honeymoon phase. I didn't feel the same as when I was a teenager or even in my 20s. And I didn't need to be told, as a literally middle-aged man, about the honeymoon phase just because I was single, as if I'd never experienced it in 39 years of life or never heard of it before. But yeah, that was just for me. I just wanted to get that off my chest in case I have to send this video to anyone in order to share my testimony with them, because it's so long, I don't want to have to say it over and over and over again in person. Yeah. And, to those of you who are still young or healthy enough to experience the honeymoon phase, enjoy it. Just believe in Jesus together, put God first, all that stuff I said, right? And, yeah. Anyway, I'm questioning whether or not to read it's just a bunch of opinions, so I think I've said enough. Thanks for listening to my video, and I pray that if you haven't already, that you call upon the name of the Lord to be saved. Confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that God has raised him, Jesus, from the dead, and you shall be saved. Click these links for more in-depth information, and thank you, and if it's in God's will, the Lord God bless you. In Jesus' name. Amen.